Welcome, everybody. My name is Andrew Patricio, and over the last 20 years, I've been working with business owners. And in that time, I've run quite a lot of webinars, and I find that there's always that bit of mystery. People think they're quite complicated. So what I'm going to share with you today is that they're not that complicated, and I think they can be a really great marketing tool. Really effective. We had a very good example. If anybody attended our webinar last week we had a guest on, and it's interesting how much revenue he generated out of that webinar. It's a really great way to connect with business owners. It's a great way to connect with your customers, and I encourage every single one of you, if you haven't tested using webinars before, maybe now's the time. And today I'm going to share with you how to do it. So I really would like some of you to start doing it. But let's start off, why should we even host webinars? What are the key benefits? The first thing is that webinars are really, really convenient. I can set up a webinar in 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, I can get a webinar up and running. It's a really powerful tool. The other thing that I like about webinars is you can host them from anywhere. I was sitting down with a business owner yesterday, and I was saying that the one thing I love about webinars is I can be in a hotel room in Zagreb, in Croatia, like I was a few weeks ago, in front of my computer, speaking to the rest of the world. It opens up so many opportunities for you, and I encourage you to look at it as a way to connect with your customers. The other great thing about webinars is that they are affordable. You can use webinar technology today for free. I'm going to show you some of the technology you can use out there, some of the paid technology, and some of the free resources. But if you just want to run a small webinar with 10 people or 20 people, I mean, you can even run up to 1,000 people or 2,000, you can use a free resource. So I'm going to share with you, how do you do that? How is it that you can use affordable technology or even free technology to run webinars? The other thing that I really like about webinars, and this is one of the key things, is that they are measurable. At the end of the webinar, I can tell you exactly how many people signed up. I can tell you how many people attended. I can even tell you how long they were on the webinar and if they were focused. So it is a really great tool. And I encourage people to use it because it just works so well. It's a great educational tool. It's a great lead generation tool. And the most important thing is it's measurable. I like things that are measurable. Actually, they're more measurable than most tools out there. I know, for example, we regularly run some Facebook ads. And I ran one this week, and it was interesting when you reflect back and you look at the people that signed up, you really don't know too much about them. You really don't know. I checked some of the people out, and some of these people that had clicked a like on my ad were not the most interesting people in the world that I want to connect. And I think that is the key thing that we need to understand, that webinars are measurable. The other thing you can use is you can use webinars to generate leads. And you've got to be very, very careful. But I think last week we used a very good example. In my mind, obviously, it was one of the BizLaunch webinars. But we used a very, very good example of how you can use a webinar to generate leads. Very effective. We ran the webinar. We sent you a link to the page. We allowed you to do a free assessment. And a bunch of people have been now speaking to Ari about him doing his search engine optimization. And it was a very, very good example of how you can do it. And I've used it over the years to pick up work in different parts of the world because I can run a seminar from anywhere. I can broadcast it. I've even gone as far as broadcasting a webinar to a room of small business owners in different parts of the country. So it's really a creative way of connecting with people. The other thing about webinars, if you do them properly, is they can be very, very engaging. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples on this webinar. Not things that I always use, but things that I have access to that you can use on a webinar. But webinars can be very engaging. And I try when we're running the BizLaunch webinars to try and make them as engaging as possible, to get people involved, to ask people where they're from, because there's nothing worse, I think, than taking time out of your business, attending a webinar, and getting bored. So you've got to try and make them as engaging as possible. You can share slides, you can ask questions, you can share your desktop, you can do drawings. There's just so many things that you can do. The other thing that I like about webinars is they are educational. And I've used it quite a lot of times over the years to educate business owners. I think it's a great tool. They can sit at home in their pajamas and they can listen in on a webinar. And the key advantage is you have access to the recording afterwards. And that is, I think, a key benefit of a webinar. I know how many times I've been to a seminar, sat down, taken a couple of notes, and then afterwards try and reflect on what I learned and forgotten. I still think seminars, live seminars, are a great tool, but I think you can use webinars as something to supplement, and that is the key thing. It's just like a supplemental thing, especially if you're working, in my case, working with business owners. The nice thing about a webinar, it's affordable, easy to set up, and we don't have to have large groups because the technology is quite cheap. So, engaging, educational, interactive. And the other thing is you can repurpose the content. So a lot of you maybe noticed that we record the webinar, I then convert it to an MP3, and we upload it onto the BizLaunch website. But that same video I could upload onto Facebook, I could upload onto Twitter, I could upload onto YouTube. There are just so many ways you can repurpose this content. And this is what makes it quite exciting, because you can make quite dynamic content really quickly, and you can repurpose it. So a great opportunity. And the other thing I like is the short lead time. I can sit down with anybody today, and we can have a webinar set up for next week, Tuesday, and have hundreds of people signing up for this webinar. And I think the key thing is you cannot do that in a regular seminar. And the thing about seminars, I find nowadays they're getting very, very expensive. And some of you have run these. You've run a seminar and 2 people show up. Not really good for the ego. Like this, we get hundreds of people, just so you know. We get hundreds of people on the BizLaunch webinar. And the nice thing is, even if people don't show up, we can still communicate with them. So it's a great way to communicate and educate people. So these are some of the reasons. I think they're great tools and something that you can use very, very effectively. So let us discuss some webinar hosting platforms now, because people are always trying to work out which is the best one. And let me be honest with you, I don't think that there's one webinar platform that's better than the other. We've used WebEx, I think, maybe for 5 or 6 years, and it works really well. The part that people do not like about WebEx is that you have to download an app, and some of you don't like that. And I found that lately, more and more business owners have got firewalls on their computer, and that really creates a problem. For a tool like WebEx, it creates a problem. So sometimes I love the technology because it's reliable, it works, it doesn't break down. Then other times when business owners contact me and say it's not working, or it's not downloading, or they don't want to download it, then I get a little bit sensitive about it. But WebEx is the big advantage of WebEx. It's owned by Cisco. It's an app. It's been around for a long time. Could they update some features? I believe they could, but it's quite a stable way to do it. It costs about, if you use, I think, less than 100 people to a webinar, it costs about $49 a month, I believe. We use a much bigger package, so we use the Event Center, which we pay about $300 a month, or $399 a month. So you can get a package between about $50 and about $400. If you're only doing less than 100 people, it works really well. The next one that I see has become far more popular, and it seems to be more popular, is GoToWebinar. I've used GoToWebinar a few times, and it works well. The only problem is that the one time I ran a webinar, actually I ran it with GoToMeeting, and a lot of the people online couldn't hear. And so this was a bit of a problem. The way we solve this problem, so if you ever have anybody on a webinar, and I'm sure it happens to you sometimes when you join a webinar and you can't hear the speaker, it's typically because of the internet connection. If you as a listener don't have a great internet connection, that could be the issue. So whenever we run webinars, we use a cable internet to run a webinar. I just realized that today I'm not using a cable internet. So yeah, I'm lecturing you on using cable internet to run a webinar, and today I'm not using cable. But typically, I would use the cable to run a webinar. GoToWebinar, very effective. It works really well. You share your screen, you can record, you can do exactly what you do with WebEx. Some people prefer it. It's more slick, I think. You can build better landing pages and things like that. So that's GoToWebinar. Then there's Google Hangouts, and I really like Google Hangouts. The only problem is that I think the technology is still not perfect. So the technology is still not perfect. Yvonne's asking me cable. So I don't know if you remember, Yvonne, but years ago, what we used to do is we used to plug a cable from the internet from your router to your computer. So that's what I'm talking about when I say cable, okay? So when you take a cable from your router to your internet, which most people don't do nowadays, but I thought I'd share that with you, okay? So most of us would use just use wireless. The problem with wireless, it's not 100% stable, so you've got to understand that, okay? But GoToWebinar costs you, I think, the same price, about $50 if you're doing up to 100 people, and if you go up to 500 people, it costs about $399, okay? So that's the cost of GoToWebinar, okay? Yes, so hardwired is when you plug a cable into your computer. That's what I'm talking about. Then you have Google Hangouts. So I'm just going to share with you Google Hangouts. I mean, you can start a Google Hangout from your computer. Okay, so here's an example. If you look at the screen now, there's a Google Hangout that you can run. You can run it directly from your computer, and it works really, really well. The only challenge I have with Google Hangouts is that sometimes the technology doesn't work perfectly. That's what I find. There seems to be a little bit delay. But if I'm having a meeting with, say, 5 people or 10 people or even 15 people, I use Google Hangouts on a regular basis. And it is free. It is free, and it works very effectively. So I encourage you, even if you don't buy technology, if you're using Gmail, you can use Google Hangouts straight away, and it's very effective. I've used it a bunch of the times, and it works brilliantly. The last one is Webinar Jam. So Webinar Jam is a new technology. I've seen a couple of tech people using it. What it does is it takes Google Hangouts and it puts like a skin on top. And what this helps you do is it helps you register people better. It has follow-up emails and all that type of stuff. So Webinar Jam costs, I think, about $349 or $400 a year, and it seems to be quite effective. I've seen a bunch of people doing it. Somebody asked me a little bit now about Skype. Skype is just as good. If you want to run a small group of, say, 10 people, you can use Skype. You can use Google Hangouts. Again, Google Hangouts is linked to your Gmail, so you just have to activate it, and it works straight away. So just Google Hangouts, and you can easily see how to do it. And again, Deborah's mentioned FaceTime. Exactly. If you're working with small groups and say 5 people or 10 people, you can do that. So somebody's asked me, what are my thoughts about Periscope? I think Periscope is brilliant. If you like being on camera and if you like connecting with people, I think it's a great way of using. I haven't actually used Periscope yet, and I think the reason is that I have a face more for radio than for TV. So as I get older, I use video less. But otherwise, If you're still young and you're good looking, I think Periscope is brilliant. Okay, Rhonda? So that's the only reason I use Periscope. I think a couple of little bit of insecurity there, so that's why I don't use Periscope, but very, very effective. So the idea here is that there are quite a bunch of platforms out there. Which one you use doesn't matter. If you're going to be running a big events with hundreds of people like us, I would recommend you either use WebEx or GoToWebinar. Otherwise, you can use anything really. I mean, if you find one that is $20 a month or $50 a month or whatever, you can do that. And there's a bunch of those. So feel free to do that. So let's move on. The key thing whenever you're going to run a webinar is think about your audience. So identify your ideal audience. That is the key thing. Who do you want to target? Do you want to target business owners? Do you want to target large corporations? Whatever. The more targeted your content is, the more targeted your audience is, the better it is. And this is like any marketing. I don't think it's really any different. So any marketing, you've got to come up with your target audience. So identify who your target audience is. The other thing you've got to remember, and this is a typical small business thing, a lot of you are attending this webinar now, but I can see that some of you are not concentrating. No, not really. I can't see anything. That is something you've got to be very, very careful of when you working with small business owners specifically, is you've got to try and keep their interest. So those of you that are not concentrating, I would concentrate, because I'm going to share with you some really interesting stuff that you should be focused on in this webinar. So make sure you do that. But target your audience. It is one of the best ways of making your webinar very effective. Think of who is the ideal audience. So that's the first thing. The second thing you want to do is come up with an interesting topic. I've got to tell you, this is probably the most important part of your webinar. We've tested it over the years. Sometimes we've taken the same topic, and just tweaked it a little bit. And it's amazing how one time you get 700 people registered, the next time you get 500 people registered. So it's a really powerful tool. So you've got to make sure that you come up with an interesting topic. How do you come up with this topic? There's a couple of ways. One of the things you could identify is go to your blog and identify the most popular blogs that you've had. Blogs that you've had more comments for, blogs that people have interacted. Those are probably the best webinar topics. If you don't have a blog for yourself, go and find the top 5 blogs in your industry, look at their headings, and get ideas from that. I am not saying you must copy. What I'm saying is you must get ideas from other people's blog posts, and that is a great thing. Another thing is maybe do a little bit of a round table. Sit down a bunch of your clients and say, here are 5 topics that we're going to be presenting on. Which one would you attend? So which topic really speaks to you, and you look at it and think, I really want to do that. John's asked me, have I done lunch and learns? Over the years, I've done a bunch of lunch and learns, live, in-person seminars. And one thing that we used to do in our webinars before, we used to run them from 1 to 2. And you can do lunch and learns, a great opportunity. Okay. The thing is, webinars actually work well for lunch and learns because people can eat while they listen to your webinar. And the other thing that we have found, the topic that really works is how to. So you will see often in the case of BizLaunch webinars, we'll use how to grow your business, how to use email marketing, how to grow your business online. And the reason is we get great response rates to that. So this is the way you come up with topics. See what blog topics are very popular, ask your ideal clients, and see what works well. Often when I'm working with clients, corporate clients that run webinars with us regularly, Well, I'll sit down with them and I'll say, let us help you come up with the topics. Because often they'll come up with a boring topic. So I say to them, let us just tweak it, because topics are very important. They can influence whether a person will attend or not. So it's a very, very important part of things. So you've decided on the platform. You've decided who your audience is, your target audience. You've got your topic. You are now ready to host your first webinar. Scary, but you are ready to do it. So let's move on. So you can't see it too clearly, but it's okay. I just want to show you how easy it is to set up a webinar. So this is our webinar backend. I just go in. I just make changes to the content there. So that's the way I do it, and it works wonderfully. Very, very simple. I just go in, I put the event, I put in the date, I put in the time, and I can set up a webinar in 1 minute. And the majority of technology works like this. The only one that's a little bit different is Google Hangout. Although you can do exactly the same thing. You come up with a topic, you invite people, you give them a specific time, and you set it up. So the technology is basically very, very simple. So what I encourage you to do is you do a couple of test webinars. So typically that's what I will do. If I've got a new client, I'll do a test webinar with them. If they're going to be doing the presentation, I'll give them a couple of presentation tips, and that's the way we work. So this one that I'm showing you on the screen is the WebEx platform. And one of the reasons we use WebEx is because a lot of large corporations use WebEx, so they know it's secure. So that's another reason we use it. But it's very, very easy to set it up. I could set up a webinar now. In 2 minutes, I could have a webinar up and running. So it's very, very simple and very, very effective. So here's a good question for you, okay? And I'm going to just do you something. I'm going to open a poll here, and on your screen you should see a poll. What do you think is the best day to run a webinar? So in your opinion, what is the best day to run a webinar? So I'm going to tell you that. And the second question is, what do you think is the best time to host a webinar? So while you're answering this question, let me just give you a little bit of information. The first thing is, you've got to understand who your audience is. So typically, over the years, because I've been doing seminars for 20 years, typically a Monday is not a good day to run a seminar. I believe Monday is also not a good day to run a webinar. So they've done a bunch of research over the years, and they say that the best day to do webinars is typically, well, I'll wait for you guys to answer the questions. But the best days are definitely not Monday and definitely not Friday. But again, it depends on your target audience. You know, it really depends on your target audience. If you speak to your customers and they say to you, you know what, we would like to run a webinar on a Friday afternoon or a Monday afternoon, well, you know, you can do that. Or you might decide to run it on a Monday evening, for example. Friday evening, I don't believe will work, but these are some of the opportunities for you. So understand that. So let me tell you, I haven't checked the results of the poll, but the best day to run webinars are typically Tuesdays. Okay, so typically on a Tuesday is the best day to run a webinar. Again, it depends on your audience. The other really good day is a Thursday. A Thursday is another great day to run a webinar. You know, I find this very, very interesting. The reason I find this very interesting, I used to be a retailer for 11 years, and our best days to go to the market to buy fresh produce was a Tuesday or a Thursday. So I always find that very, very interesting. So I recommend to people, if you're going to run a webinar, try a Tuesday or a Thursday. But Wednesdays also work, okay? So we've run a bunch of webinars on Wednesdays, and they've been very, very effective. So it really depends on you. The second one is, what is the best time to run a webinar, okay? And again, a bunch of research has been done on that, and they find that 11 a.m. Pacific or 2 p.m. Eastern Time is the best time to run a webinar. Okay, so those 1 p.m. Eastern or 10 a.m. Pacific also works, but those are the best times to do that. We have run some webinars in the evening, and what I found, because some people will say, well, business owners can't attend webinars during the day, so let's run them in the evening. I find that in the evenings, you get people signing up, but your attendance rate is not so high, okay? So that's one thing you got to realize. I found that when we host webinars on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern or 11 a.m. Pacific, we get about 50% of the people that sign up for a webinar show up, okay? So about 50% of people that sign up for a webinar show up, okay? So that's the key thing. So just be very, very careful of assuming, for example, weekends are maybe, in theory, they're a good time for seminars and webinars, but in practice, you may not get the turnout rate. People may sign up, but they just may not show up. So just be very careful of that. The advantage you've got with a webinar is that even if they don't show up, at least you've got their content. So John's asked me, what about B2C? Again, it depends on your audience. Let's say you're selling to consumer. If your consumer is going to be watching a webinar at work, well, the same thing will apply. But if your consumer is not going to be watching it at work, probably in the evening at about 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., that'll probably be the best time. Okay, I've seen a bunch of people running webinars at 7 or 8 p.m. Again, the best days will probably Tuesday and Thursday. Don't get too sensitive if people don't show up, because there might be a TV show, there might be the weather, all those things have an impact. The problem with the webinars is that you often know that the person's going to record it. So that is the reason that people don't always show up. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that because webinars are free, people think, oh, I haven't paid, so I don't have to attend. Actually, we may be testing that over the next 12 months is to run some more detailed paid-for webinars, and we're going to test those, and then we'll be able to have some of those statistics for you. But in the meantime, just understand that free webinars, a lot of people sign up, doesn't mean they always show up. We get a lot of people showing up, but I think it's because the topics are interesting for a lot of people. So there's the time. The next part, the most important part, I think, is the marketing of webinars. And I'm going to give you some really good tips here. I shouldn't be giving you these, but I'm going to give them to you anyway. I have found the most effective way, okay, so the most effective way to market your webinar is by using email marketing. Now, the biggest challenge some of you may have is, how do I grow an email database? So that is one of the things that you have to start working on immediately. On your website, make sure that you allow people to give you their email address so you've got that information. And that's what we have. We have your email addresses. We have it on our database, and that's why we communicate with you, okay? So email marketing, in my opinion, is probably one of the better ways to generate registrations for webinars. The second one that we have tried over the years is Facebook marketing. And I must be honest, I'm not a fan of Facebook marketing. So I'm not a fan of Facebook marketing, but the reality is that you can use it. So somebody said, yeah, what if you don't have a website? Well, then you can use Facebook marketing. What you can do is you can create a graphic, you can put on Facebook, you can spend a bit of money, and you can take people directly to the registration link of your webinar, okay? And we've used this a bunch of times over the years, but I must be honest with you, I've never really been excited with the results. Never really come away from doing a Facebook campaign and saying, you know what, that was brilliant, that was effective, and it worked for me. But the point is, that doesn't mean you mustn't try it. So I've seen a bunch of people doing it. I'm actually now thinking about one of our objectives now is to get more large corporations to run webinars with us. So one of the things I'm thinking of doing is creating some very, very targeted Facebook ads. But again, you've got to understand, I'm a little bit apprehensive. So that's my personal one. The second one is Twitter. I found Twitter to be very, very effective. Again, it depends on your customer. It depends on your target market. So what we do is we'll share it on Twitter, and then we get a few people, I must be honest, not thousands, but we get a few people registering on that. Actually, one that I didn't put on the screen, which is also a very powerful one, is LinkedIn. I found LinkedIn to be very effective. We've got quite a large following on LinkedIn. I'm part of quite a few groups, and I find a lot of people find us because of LinkedIn. Okay, so we share the links in the chat or share the links on our wall, and we get quite a few registrations. But still, our most effective is email marketing. A group that does a really good job, a really, really good job, is these guys on the right-hand side called the Lead Pages. They build really beautiful landing pages for their webinars. And I think that's something that we at BizLaunch don't do a good job of. It's something that I'm going to be working on over the next year or so. But they build beautiful landing pages. And I think that is a key thing, that if you build great landing pages, that's going to encourage people to register more. So here's a very good example. This is a really good webinar topic, 4 steps to quickly grow your list, for those of you that are not sure how to grow your lists. And the other thing is the call to action or the registration is very good. So I really like this. So if anybody's looking for examples, I would encourage you to check out Lead Pages. They do a great job. They build landing pages for webinars, for marketing, for Facebook, for all those type of things. The last big opportunity is affiliates. So you find other people that have a database similar to yours, and you can partner with them on marketing your webinar. And then maybe you can do a deal, for example. We haven't done this often over the years. We did an example last week, and it's something that I'm going to probably do more of in the future. But the thing that I've got to always be very, very careful of is that the quality of the training is really good. And I think that's the key thing. Because if somebody's coming to a webinar and the quality of the training is not good, and they're trying to sell a product, well, then you know what? It's going to ruin our reputation. So that is something that I'm a little bit wary of, but it's something we're going to test. And I will work out very, very quickly if you don't like it, because you'll all start shouting at me and saying, we hated that last person. So you guys are very, very vocal, so you are a really good audience to test that on. But we're going to do that. So Yvonne's asked a good question here. Should webinars be free or can there be a charge? I think that's a great question. Let me ask you this question. If we ran webinars that we would charge you for, okay, so we would charge you for the webinars, we'd give you, say, 90 minutes instead of an hour, we'd give you a lot of free content, and maybe address some of your questions, how much would you pay for it? So put in the chat column how much you'd be prepared to pay for a live webinar with more content, more quality content, how much would you be prepared to pay for it? Okay, put that in your chat column. There you go. You see, that's how you do research. You see how you do research? That's how you do research. So your question early on, will people pay for webinars? There's your answer. Great target market. You know what? Maybe this is something that BizLaunch should be launching in the future, is a bunch of free webinars, and then we can have some paid webinars. There you go. So thank you for that. There you go. Really interesting, and maybe something that we could do. Again, a great way of doing it. Do you see the power of webinars? This is why I like webinars, because you can ask and you can get instant response. All right, so before your webinar, I'm going to give you my secrets. This is crazy. I've never done this before, but anyway, I like you people, so I'll give it to you. So this is the way we have found to be the most effective way to market webinars, and we're talking specifically about business owners. Number one is 2 weeks before your event is when you start marketing a webinar, okay? So that's the first thing. Secondly, a week before the webinar, you send them a reminder email, okay? So first a 2-week marketing, then you send them a week. One of the best days to market your event is the day of. So some of you will notice that I send a webinar the day of the event, a couple of hours before the event, usually 3 hours before the event. And I find that to be one of the most effective emails. Okay, so remember that. That is one of the most effective emails, is when we send you the day of the webinar, we send you a invite. A lot of people sign up the day of the event. So we get up to about 20% of our registrations the day of the event. So it's a very, very powerful thing. And the other thing that we do is, you'll notice that we remind you. 30 minutes before the event, we send you a reminder saying the event is starting in 30 minutes time. So if any of you want a great model, just copy this. This works really well. How have we worked it out? We've made lots of mistakes over the years, and we've found this works really, really well. Okay, so understand that. So Ruby says, day before, I do not check my emails daily. Ruby, you're a difficult customer because you don't check your emails daily. Again, but you've got to think about your audience, and that is the key thing. So if Ruby is your audience, you send it to her the day before. I'm just telling you what works for us, and it's been very effective. I mean, we get a lot of registrations during the webinar. So I want you to take some tips from me. Let me tell you another secret, but don't tell anybody this. This is just between you and I. When I present my webinars, I usually stand up. So that's one thing I do. And the reason I stand up is that it gives you the opportunity to project your voice better. Okay, so I would encourage you to do that. Is when you're doing a webinar, stand up. You can sit down every now and then. So I stand up, and then sometimes I sit down, sitting down. But you want to project your voice. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is you must interact. It is very, very simple. I think one of the things that make BizLaunch webinars usually much better than most webinars you go to are the fact that we interact with you in the chat column. So we have a very active chat column. Also, the other thing that we do is that we ask you questions, and the Q&A that I do at the end of the webinar, I find to be very effective, okay? So here's a good question from Debbie and Connie. So one of the questions is, do I use a headset? So to do this sound, I use the telephone. So I dial in, not always, but usually I use the telephone. And the reason I do that is because if the technology goes down, let's say my computer crashes, my internet disconnects, I still have all of you online. Okay, so that's the reason I use the telephone. If I do use a microphone, so I have a really good quality microphone, especially when I'm traveling around the world, I use a really good quality microphone, which I use that I plug in a USB into my computer, and so that's the way I use it. But I still find the telephone the most effective way to project yourself. And the reason I'm going to say that is because my computer's crashed a bunch of times while I'm on a webinar, and I can keep going. Oh, that's a very important point. Whenever you're running a webinar, make sure that you have water, a lot of water, because your voice gets very, very dry. The webinar presenter last week said to me, geez, my voice got dry. I said, that's why I encourage you to have a lot of water, especially if you speak loud like me and you're trying to express yourself. Have a bottle of water there. Ask people questions. Early on, that thing of doing the microphone, I still think one of the key, not sorry, the microphone, the poll, but I still think one of the key advantages of BizLaunch webinars are the Q&A at the end. I think we do a great job, even though I'm doing it myself, but I think we do a great job of asking questions, especially if we leave some time for it. Today I haven't left any time, but usually we do a really good job of it. Do polls like I did earlier on, and you can share your desktop like I did earlier on. It's very, very easy to do, and it works really well. So don't be afraid to test these things. Don't be afraid to make mistakes is what I say to people. But don't make mistakes if people are paying. If people are free, you can make mistakes. But also be very careful. You don't want to irritate people. You know, you make a mistake and then people get irritated quite easily. So just be very, very careful. Once the webinar is done, this opens up an opportunity for you. And I think last week at our webinar, we did a really good job. Today, I'm not going to do it. But last week at our webinar, what we did is we sent you a link to a page that you went to, and then you could download the slides and you could apply for the free application. I encourage you to do that. Okay, so do that. It works really effectively. So thank people for attending and follow up. And the sooner you follow up, the better it is. Let me say that again. The sooner you follow up, the better it is. The other thing you can do is repurpose your recording. So you can turn it into an MP3 or MP4. You can put on Facebook. You can put on Twitter, and it works really well. So do that. It works very effectively. So let me just summarize, and then I'll answer a bunch of your questions. Number one is develop a plan and set goals to run webinars. It is a great way of doing it, and it can be very effective. Number two is choose the technology. GoToWebinar, WebEx, whatever you're going to use, you decide. Just remember one thing, which is one of the big disadvantages of using GoToWebinar and WebEx, is you cannot broadcast over telephones and iPads, which is a bit of an issue nowadays. But I'm sure the technology will soon be available. The only problem with webinar technology is there's voice, there's video, there's Q&A, there's not enough space on a phone to do it. If it's just broadcast, then it works really well. So choose the technology. Target your market. Identify your ideal customer and target those people. Develop a great topic. Your topic is the most important part of your webinar. It really is. It can draw a lot of traffic. Make sure you market your webinar. Use email marketing, use Facebook, use Twitter, use LinkedIn, use Periscope, use whatever's available out there, but market it. It can be very, very effective. Interact with people. So, make sure that you interact. Talk to people, make comments, ask questions. If you can use a little bit of humor, great on webinars. So interact with people. Follow up and persevere. That is the key thing, because webinars, your first webinar, 2 people are going to show up. 50 people are going to register. 2 people are going to show up, and you're going to get angry. But you keep doing it, and it can work. I think webinars are a very, very effective way to market your business, so I encourage you to try it. And if you can't do it yourself, you can always give BizLaunch a call. If you want to run regular webinars, maybe 1 a month or 2 a month, we can do it for you. We'll take your money, we'll run your webinars, and we'll do a great job for you. But use webinars. They're great technology. They're very effective. You can use it for lead generation, and you can do a great job. Excellent. Connect with your customers, make lots of money, and I'll be happy.